Well, hello everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining me for Bishop Talk. This is my time that I get to come to you in this venue to talk about some exciting things that are happening around the world and the globe as it affects and it relates to global justice issues. And for this segment, I am happy to have with me Joe Simpson, who is the managing director for the Society Against Sexual Orientation and Discrimination. Joel and I have had the opportunity to meet face to face a couple of times, but mostly we're meeting through Zooms and things and getting updated and talking about what's going on in this country. So before we dive into it, Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your background, and we'll just kind of go from there.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for having me, Bishop Griffin. So I'm Joel Simpson. I'm the founder and managing director of SASOD Guyana. And SASOD Guyana is a human rights organization and movement leading change, educating and serving communities to end discrimination, particularly based on sexuality and gender in Guyana and the Caribbean. And we have three key programs through which we achieve our mission. First, we have our human rights program, which is about advocating for respect, protection, fulfillment of human rights for vulnerable populations, in particular groups whose sexual rights are violated and who often are unable to access gender justice. So particularly sexual and gender minorities, sex workers, survivors of gender-based violence, people living with HIV, those groups who are usually socially stigmatized and who face social and economic disadvantage. We also have what we call a homophobia education program, which focuses on public education and educating key stakeholders in different sectors of society to end all forms of homophobia. So whether it's transphobia, lesbophobia, biphobia, as the case might be, we kind of use homophobia as an umbrella term for all the hatred and discrimination and fear against sexual and gender minorities. So that's a really big program that is always continuous in the work that we do. And then our third program is our human services program, which is about researching and coming up with solutions and either facilitating or providing critical socioeconomic services for marginalized and vulnerable populations. Those tend to be health services, whether they're sexual health services, mental health services, public health research as it relates to issues affecting key populations, and also other kind of often humanitarian work that we've done during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially, and other work related to ensuring that people get critical socioeconomic needs fulfilled, like education, employment, housing, that sort of thing. So that's what we do in a nutshell. In terms of my background, what can I say about me?
Well, I want you to include in your background a little bit that I know about you is that you studied human rights law at Nottingham in England, and I want to know a little bit about what led you down that road. What got you there? Maybe that's a part of a little bit about you. What got you to that particular school?
Right. So directly out of high school, I studied law at the University of Guyana. And when I finished studying law, just about a couple of months after I graduated, I actually joined a local law firm as legal associate and administrative manager. And that firm was headed by one of my former lecturers, who taught me constitutional law and the law of tort, Stephen Fraser. And I was there for a couple of months. And it was my first job in the legal profession. And while I was there, an opportunity came up at the United Nations Development Program for a post as human rights associate, and I decided to apply. At that point, we had already started SASOD while I was at second year in university at 2003. And at the time, it was called Society Against Students, Against Sexual Orientation Discrimination, because it started as a student lobby group, informally, not registered at the university. So I was already doing a bit of human rights work from since 2003. And this was 2005. And I went to UNDP and I worked on a project there for about a year. And that really captivated my interest in continuing to work in human rights, so the intersections of human rights law, gender, sexuality, sexual health, and HIV. And after that period, and while all of this is happening, I'm still volunteering. SASOD was volunteer led completely until January 2007, when we hired our first part-time staff person, who wasn't me actually. I was actually only the chair of the board at the time, chair of the board of trustees at the time. I didn't actually become full-time staff till about 2011. So after UNDP, there was another opportunity that came up for me to work as UNESCO human rights researcher at the University of the West Indies campus in Trinidad and Tobago. That was also a one-year project. So I moved to Trinidad for 14 months. After that one-year project, I worked as a consultant for the local YMCA on a gender and masculinities project for about 2 months. And then came back home to Guyana, where there was a consulting opportunity with SASOD, and I worked as human rights research consultant for a few months until we started to get more projects, more funding to be able to hire full-time staff. So how did I get to Nottingham? I applied for the UK government's most prestigious scholarship, the Shivning Scholarship, and I was successful. I was successful in 2012, I believe. Yeah, 2012, if my memory serves me correctly. I started in September, and I pursued a Master of Laws in Human Rights Law at the University of Nottingham, which was my first choice because at the time, they offered a post in sexuality, gender, and human rights. And also at the time, a member of the Human Rights Committee, the United Nations Human Rights Committee, was faculty of University of Nottingham. So it was ranked in the top 3 human rights law universities in the UK at the time. And that was my interest in going there. Unfortunately, in the year that I was there, that member of the committee and that course was not offered because the member committee was on sabbatical. But I still had a very good experience at Nottingham in the academic year of 2012, 2013, when I did my LLM there.
Wow. Incredible journey and well done. And so the part you just mentioned, I didn't catch when I was reading some stuff earlier. I didn't know you were basically a founding member of the organization,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
yes, yeah.
I knew you've been a part of it for a while. I didn't realize that you was a founding member of that. So that's you have seen this from cradle to where it is now. And so can you speak to from inception to your studies abroad, to using your skills and your gift in the organization? And I know that you was last time we spoke, and there was some constitutional stuff going on, and you were like the lead person for that. How do you feel that your work impacts for those who are disenfranchised or discriminated against the most, especially as it relates to the LGBTQI community in your country and also others? How do you see yourself leading? I'm going to say the change for a betterment through law.
Well, I think I'm very passionate about law reform because I think that while social change is extremely important and it's actually a prerequisite for law reform, that sustaining social change is very important to have institutional change. If the laws don't change to remove discrimination, protect people from discrimination, then we will be at the mercy of the ebbs of the culture wars, like what we see in the US. You know, there's been so much progress, like when we look at if I can't comment about US politics, Barack Obama's presidency. When we look at the term that Barack Obama was in for 2 years, and we look at now, it just seems like socially, the US is often regressing to, a lot of issues that just should have been settled are resurfacing. And issues that seem almost trivial, transgender people using the bathrooms of the gender of their choice, reading programs for kids by, drag artists and all of that sort of thing and so on. I think you'll always be at the mercy of those kinds of ebbs in the culture wars and so on, and where people are socially if you don't have institutional change. I think that's very important for sustaining social change. I've also always felt that, especially in the Guyanese context, my country has about 800,000 people right now, which includes maybe tens of thousands of Venezuelan migrants because of the crisis there. So a small population in a country that is 83,000 square miles,
Mm.
less than 1 million people, and about over 70% rainforest, just to give your viewers some context. In the context, it's taken a long time for LGBTIQ people to be visible, and it's often the working class who are most visible. The upper class and upper middle class tend to not be as visible because they have privileges that allow them to occupy spaces which are free from discrimination. They can travel to, very safe locations, exotic locations, very progressive places, and so on. And the working class can do that. And I've always felt that a personal obligation, a personal duty to try to improve the situation for the people who can't flee. A lot of people have fled and people are still fleeing, even in the context of the fastest growing economy in the world because of our relatively recently found oil wealth.
Mm.
LGBTIQ people still don't want to live here.
Mm.
I have zero interest in migrating, even with all the challenges that my country has. And I felt like I do feel that my life's work is to improve the situation here in Guyana for those people who can't leave, because I could easily leave, but everybody can't leave. And if everybody leaves, then who's going to do this work to make the country a better place for LGBTIQ people and our citizens generally? So I really do feel like it's my purpose and my calling, so to speak. And I'm very committed to that obligation socially, professionally, personally. And for as long as I can, as long as I have the energy to make a contribution. And I think the form my contribution can take will vary over time. Like I mentioned at the beginning, when I started doing this work, it was completely voluntarily, and I worked in other organizations and so on for a number of years, and we hired part-time staff for projects and so on for a long time before I became full-time staff, before there was opportunities for me to become full-time staff. And I think there will be a point, maybe in the relatively near future, where I can transition out of a full-time role and my role can become voluntary again, but always supporting the movement, whether it's as a board director, as a volunteer, or whatever the case might be. I do feel that, and it's needed in a very small place where there are a limited number of people who are willing to come forward and make the personal and professional sacrifices that come with activism. Yeah. Some of those sacrifices include that you get kind of boxed in, and it then becomes difficult to transition into other kinds of careers and professional work because you've been known as the activist or an activist for a decade or two in a very, very small space. So it's very difficult then to go and work in private sector again or the public sector. That becomes very difficult. So a lot of people are not willing to make those personal and professional sacrifices. But it's a conscious decision that I've made over time to make this contribution. Yeah.
So, and from some of our previous conversations, can you say a little bit to how religion impacts your work on behalf of the LGBTI community there and other marginalized people?
In a major way. I think, and this isn't expected, I think everywhere in the world, religion is often a dominating factor, I think, in the realization of human rights, particularly related to LGBTIQ rights. Our country, for those who don't know, is multi-religious. We're largely made up of six ethnic groups. We have our indigenous people that came from Mongolia before anybody else. And then we had the Europeans that came with quote unquote Columbus in the 1400s. And with European colonization came slavery. After the end of slavery, there was a period of indentureship where they brought East Indians from India. Then they brought Portuguese from Madeira, and then lastly Chinese. In modern times, of course, there's been other kinds of migration patterns, which include Brazilians from our neighboring countries, and then most recently, tens of thousands of Venezuelans because of the crisis there. So our ethnic makeup has determined our religious composition, the religious composition of our population. So we're about 60% Christian, and that's because the colonizers Christianized also the indentured laborers that came. So you will also find, although they came from India, a lot of Indo-Guyanese who are Christian in our country. If I remember correctly, then we're about maybe like 30-something%. I mean, is that much? Maybe that not. Yeah, maybe about 30-something%. Or late 20s, maybe like 20-something% Hindu population. The Muslim population, according to the last census, which is probably 2012 or so, is somewhere in the single digits. And then there's smaller religious groups like Rastafarians, Baha'is, and so forth. Really, really small numbers. So I say that to say that the influence of the Judeo-Christian religions, in particular Christianity and Islam, is the majority. It's about 60-something%. And we know traditionally how the Judeo-Christian religions have dealt with this issue of homosexuality and transgenderism and the issues of gender and sexuality generally. We have seen efforts by organized religious groups to resist law reform related to LGBTIQ issues, and it has stymied progress over the last 2 decades. But I'm happy to say, because of the work we're doing to engage religious communities, sensitize people, that has changed significantly. We now have, and it even started since the 2000s, but we've had gradually over the last 2 decades, Catholic, Anglican, Presbyterian, and other kinds of religious leaders who have come forward to say they're very supportive of decriminalizing same-sex intimacy, non-discrimination protections. We even have a Muslim leader who is supportive of non-discrimination protections related to sexual orientation and gender identity and gender expression.
Wow.
And when we started in 2003, that kind of support didn't exist. And I think it's growing, and it can only grow. And with the work that we're doing, some of the religious leaders have asked us to do more training and sensitization. And we're going to embark on that starting as early as next month. Actual training workshops with 15 Christian leaders at a time, 15 Hindu leaders at a time, over a number of days with space in between them to give people an opportunity to think about the issues and reflect and so on. And then we're going to try next year to maybe do some work with mixed groups of religious leaders and things like that and so on. So there's a concerted effort to build more faith-based allies. And I think it's supporting our law reform efforts tremendously.
Well, I think a lot of it is also a testament to your longevity with the organization and other roles you fulfill in partnering with other organizations around the world. But certainly your witness, your presence And as you said earlier, this is one of the reasons why you won't leave, and in the passion for why you have never left your country is coming through to me, and this is why you're doing it for those who are not able to do it because you are adding your voice to that mix, and so I think that's just very important. So well done for that area.
Yeah.
So
And let me say too that the metropolitan community churches and global uh, the Global Justice Project has been an important part of that trajectory over the years. In the work that you have done with the Sunshine Cathedral in Jamaica and all the regional conferences that me and many of my colleagues, former board members, members of the organization, some who have migrated also, and so on, have participated in, especially because of how we have had a format of ensuring that anybody that participates in these kinds of training conferences and so on come back and share and report back to our membership and our leadership. I think that's been an important part of building our capacity to engage with the religious leaders. So thank you as well to the Metropolitan Community Churches and the global social justice project that you are part of for supporting us over the years.
we're glad to be in partnership with you, and I kind of want to do one more question. I think we have time for one more question here. From the from your work in the courts and everything, what would you say has been your most maybe recent winning, if you will, and what's coming up next for you as you continue to move forward and petitioning things through the justice system there?
Well, I think we're heavily focused on our campaign. We have this Guyana Together campaign that's going on right now. I think we're heavily focused on decriminalization of same-sex intimacy. It took a long time for us, spending over 9 years in a court battle to decriminalize cross-dressing. We had the law against cross-dressing in Guyana, in the entire Americas region, supposedly also in actually civil law in the entire world. The other places that have a law against cross-dressing tend to have it in Sharia law, like Malaysia and Northern Nigeria and so on. So we are seemingly the last one, last secular law against cross-dressing. And it took us over 9 years in court to do that. We are advocating for Parliament to remove the law by running a robust public communications campaign, which involves sensitizing leaders and stakeholders and engaging with lawmakers, legislators, parliamentarians, and so on. And we think that is important, and that will bear fruit soon, because we don't want to just engage. We don't want to necessarily assume that we have to engage in another long court battle just to change a bad law. Once we get beyond that, we are looking at legislation that protects people from hate crimes and discrimination. So we're advocating for, Guyana doesn't have any legislation against hate crimes against anybody. Like, hate crime isn't a concept in our law. It's only a concept in our media, right? So the media will talk about people experiencing hate crimes, but there's no hate crimes regime in our legislation. So we need that, because hate crimes occur here, not just on the basis of sexuality and gender, but on the basis of race, ethnicity, religion, migrant status, nationality, health status, all of these kinds of other grounds. And we think we need some legislation around that. So we're going to be leading a national civil society effort to lobby for that. And also, we don't have any comprehensive legislation against discrimination of any kind in our ordinary legislation. We have a non-discrimination clause in the Constitution, which is the supreme law of our country, but no ordinary legislation around non-discrimination, save and except for our Prevention of Discrimination Act, which is only with respect to the right to work, which is just like one human right. So we need something that covers all the other human rights, the rights to health, education, housing, social services, and so forth and so on. So we're also advocating for that. And that's a recommendation that came from the Human Rights Committee this year, when our country had a review under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in March of this year. So these are recommendations that we've had for a long time, and now we're actually also hearing them being reinforced by international human rights bodies at the UN. So we're going to be heavily focused on removing the bad law, criminalizing intimacy between men, and advocating for forms of protective legislation against hate crimes and discrimination generally and comprehensively against anybody, not just LGBTIQ people.
Wow. Well, you are, I think, no more admiration from me for you for all the work you've been doing, and I think you are the right person at the right time to be leading all this change for not only just for the community but also for the country, and that's very evident that you're passionate and you're justice seeking for all people. So I want to thank you for being with me today, and just to ask one last time: is there anything you want us to know about you or your work that you're doing, and how can we support the work that you are doing there on the ground?
Well, your viewers can start by following us on social media. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, all the popular social media. We have a YouTube channel, and it's all the same handle. They could follow us at SASOD Guyana on all of those social media platforms. We are about to launch our Pride Festival. And yes, we do have Pride here in Guyana, including a Pride March. People will be very surprised to know that if they don't know. But in 2018, June 2nd, 2018, we had the first Pride Parade in the entire English-speaking Caribbean right here in Georgetown, Guyana.
Wow.
And we're launching Pride 2025 on December 7th with a big show with the winner of Drag Race Canada and an international drag artist, Priyanka, who is Canadian and born to Guyanese parents. And she's coming to Guyana for the first time for a big show here on December 7th. Of course, it's a big venture for us. So we're trying to raise funds to pull off that effort. So on her website at thequeenpriyanka.com, people could also find information about how to donate to that big event that we're trying to cover the cost for a big public launch for our Pride Festival, which will take place in the last week of June in 2025. And we're also encouraging people to come to Guyana for our Pride. That's another way to support us. So if you could dedicate your vacation time, some of your vacation time and budget to come into Georgetown, Guyana in the June 22nd to 30th, if my memory serves me correctly, yes, of 2025, that would be fantastic as well. So those are very, very tangible and practical ways that your viewers can support our local movement here at home.
Well, you just may see me in June of next year. You just never know. So
That would
I'm
be
looking forward to
fantastic.
that. Again, thank you for taking time for me today and doing this with me. And I really appreciate you and your organization and all the work that you do. So thank you so much, Joe. And may God continue to bless you and your work. And just know that we're always thinking about you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bishop. Bless.